It's 2 hours?
I have up to 2 hours to record. Surprise! We want you to speak more.
I know. Unable.
Oh my goodness. Don't block tab. Cancel. Thank you. Perfect. That is good. Okay, and how we are recording now. I have you set up. I'm going to go start a few more recordings and come back to yours.
And I'm not really, I don't know. Why says that so much? I remember this video. Yeah. This is the one where you start talking and now it's kind of a nice video.
Yeah. I was like, oh, you can't do that. There's no it threw me off the whole thing. Then I saw it. Yeah. Like double corrected me. Because I just jumped. Oh yeah.
I was gonna make a joke. I said, Jamie told me not to start.
Exactly.
And then you show up.
Jamie said, not yet.
Yes, I found them. They're all in your room now.
Okay, yeah, I know.
That's
I'm like,
awesome.
yeah.
All right, guys, welcome to MD Expo. Woo! First class, are you excited? Just me? Am I the one that drink cold brew? Hi, my name is Jamie. I'm with MD Publishing. I'm excited to kick off this class today. I'm just going to make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chantel. I have sign-in sheets. These are very important because I know you're going to want the CE credits. Please fill them out, pass it to your neighbor next to you. You can leave them in the back. We'll come pick them up once the class is over. You should have a survey near you that not required you. Please find one and fill it out. Give us all the information and feedback and stuff that you can provide. We'll go through each conference that we're going to continue to make the Expo better. We have some nomination forms on the back. Please do nominate the Department of the Month and Professional of the Month. Yes, nominate yourself because I know you're a rock star, you know you're a rock star, so let's tell the whole industry that you're a rock star. Make sure that you give us great contact information because this is how our editorial team will contact you. I'm going to get some surveys up here. Then we are going to open up the exhibit hall today at 12. There is lunch inside the exhibit hall. Please do come eat. It's complimentary, but most important, I want you to thank all of the exhibitors because without the exhibitors, we can't continue to make this conference free for the attendees. So go listen to what their company does, what their products are. Thank them for being here too. The best hour of any day is what hour?
5 o'clock.
Yes, but instead of 5, we're going to get started early at 4 o'clock. So join us at your registration desk for a happy hour, sponsored by an awesome company. I'm sure there's time to direct that part. So thank you to you when we're at this event. I know it is all yours.
Okay.
If you need anything, we're outside.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Thank you. So thank you for being here today. I think I've given this talk a few times, so I should be mastering it by this time. I don't know if she's gonna, let's close the door.
Yeah. So I'm the Director of Information Security. I oversee the security program for medical devices, medical IoT,
And other Internet of Things, cameras, building automation system. So basically, my team manages everything that is not centrally managed, anything that is not traditional IT. I started this program by myself, then now I have 2 analysts. One of them is here. It was so I'm leading the vision of the program, how it's gonna work. And then my peer is the director of IT security, and he does the traditional IT security. He has about 10 people under him, my team and his team. We work really closely together. So all of you know I come from a clinical engineering background. I've over 12 years of experience in clinical engineering, going from being a clinical engineer back in Canada to here. And then I became the clinical engineering manager at MedStar Georgetown. So I like shifting specialties. And then I started getting interested in medical device security lately. And now I'm also certified information security manager. Yay! So those CPU are really important to write your name. Now I know because I have a certification. So I want to go, I don't know if she gave me the, it's not, right? So I want to give a little bit of MedStar. I'm sure if you're in the Maryland, DC area, MedStar, we are one of the biggest large health system here in Baltimore, Maryland, DC area. We have about 10 hospitals, 278 clinics. And then we like to be the trusted leader in caring for people and advancing health. All right, so what's the health technology security landscape? So we have, as I mentioned, medical devices, lab, pharmacy, we have building automation system, we have security cameras. So basically, my team works with several people, several stakeholders. Our best are clinical engineering, because they really like technical people, and then we have pharmacy, lab, we have facilities as well. So we work with them in making sure that our devices are secure against emergent threats. However, I note, so we deployed a tool, connected passive network monitoring tool, and then we discovered that we have way more connected endpoint that we thought we have, but I think it's you will find that it's 20% of total total endpoints are connected. So we have about 80,000 connected medical devices in our inventory, so it's a large health system, and we have about 17,000 connected medical devices. I'm not including the IoTs, the servers, and the other things. So where is the technology going, right? So I think it's, I'm sure, I don't know if some of you know, but this is the, it's a tablet and it's also an ultrasound. So you just need to, we found it in one of our hospitals and it didn't go through the process. We were able to stop it thanks to our clinical engineering team, and we did the security review. So for those devices, it's important to have your security team review them so they can put the proper controls on the device. And one of the controls we put in there is making sure that it have a mobile device management. So these are tools you put on your phone, so you can delete all the data on your phone in case it's lost. And then the last thing you want to do is clinician buying these tools, entering their Gmail account, sending patient data to the cloud, and it's a PHI breach that you need to notify your patient that their PHI has been breached. So these tools, it's important to have them go through the proper channel and have your security team review them. There is also mobile technology, cloud computing. We're shifting away from having on-premise servers to SaaS solutions, even for healthcare. So with that, in MedStar, we have a security addendum for cloud technology, and this helps us put some language to limit the risk, and also to limit the risk and indemnification and any financial issue we might have with that, mitigate any risk. So it's not about eliminating every risk, but it's about controlling the risk. And the way you do that is if you have your security team review every new technology. So the first one is it's also an example of bring your own device. So these physicians like to use these tools because they can connect the probe to the phone and they can use the device. So we want to make sure that they log in using their your institution email, that the application is properly set up, that they have a mobile device management. We're also seeing a lot of artificial intelligence coming into healthcare environment. I'm not going to go in details into that. That can be a separate class. But this watch is actually it's a medical FDA approved device, and it has artificial intelligence and helps you detect seizures. And then with that, like, it sends a message to like the family, and then tell them to so that they can move the patient, and at that they, you know, that they won't die, because they could die from these seizures. And then the other device is also a mobile platform. It's from continuous monitoring, and then the physician can be at the bedside and see all the vitals on the mobile device. So it's important to, as the technology advances, it's important to partner with your information security team to make sure that these new technologies have all the controls in place. And now we're going to go into the fun part, right? So I think it has been so many critical vulnerabilities in the last quarter. One of them was Urgent 11, which is 11 vulnerabilities in the VxWorks, TCP/IP communication. I'm not going to go into that, but I think the most important part is we think that our firewall are going to protect us against everything. We think that if a device is on a clinical VLAN, that we don't need to mitigate any vulnerabilities, but no. So it's the concept of the layered defense. However, with Urgent 11, there are some controls, some blocks you could do at your firewall level, but there are additional things you could do if you have, this is if I'm speaking too much security, but it's monitoring the traffic in and out of these devices. BD Care Fusion, if you have that, so they are impacted by the Urgent 11 vulnerabilities. There are some printers, some building automation system. So it's important, I'm going to go over that. It's important to know what you have that is connected, the network attributes, important to have the tools in place. Deja Blue and Blue Keep, I'm sure you all heard of it as well. So it's also, it affects the remote desktop protocol, and they are different. So if you might read the summary and it looks similar, but it's actually different vulnerability affecting the same service. So if you've patched for one vulnerability, you need to make sure that you're also patching for another vulnerability, for Blue Keep. And I think the industry is not there yet, where it's taken still, like some of the manufacturers still releasing patches. We're not there where when there is a critical vulnerability, we have a fix for it. And there was other ones. I think there is one video that was all over the internet, where was someone taking a Raspberry Pi, taking it into the CT scanner, and actually intercepting the traffic, the DICOM traffic, and modifying the images, and also incorporating cancer in the images. Now, these are more, it's fantasy security, should I say. It's not, it's targeted, it could happen, but that's not the most common things that might happen. It's oftentimes, it's the hackers are against the low-hanging fruit. So someone coming into the hospital trying to, it's not the most common scenario. So I think there are several controls you could have in that, your network access control, which is going to prevent anything that is not registered from connecting to the network. It's going to prevent that. Your passive network monitoring tool is going to detect that. There are other ones also that we've seen, which is embedding malware into DICOM images. So they will exploit vulnerability into the images, DICOM images, and embed malware. So the thing about security, it's the threats are changing. The landscape is constantly changing, and we need to adapt, and we keep learning. So job security for us. All right, so as I was saying earlier, so I moved from clinical engineering to security, and I want to see how, I want to explain how we look at things really differently. Because I come from a clinical engineering background, was really, I can put some humor into it. So what CE thinks we do is we're just sitting behind our computers and we're just looking for vulnerabilities, which is in part is true, but we also go in the floors, we're talking to clinicians, to other departments, and then what security think, or IT security thinks that clinical engineering does, we're just in the basement, we're fixing boards, we're replacing equipment. But we all know that clinical engineering is way more than that. Now we're doing medical device security, BMDI, alarm management projects. So I think it's important to look into, when we contact security, when we contact clinical engineering to do certain tasks, because we know they're inundated with work, we analyze the risk. So is this like a real threat? We really find the best way and the least labor-intensive way to mitigate. We implement composite controls at the firewall, whatever we can in the environment to protect that from being exploited. And then we go and then we work with our stakeholders. So today I'm going to touch about the main security issues in medical devices. And I'm also going to speak about the vision of the program that we're building in MedStar. I'm going to talk about the roles and responsibilities. And then I'm going to give, I think I'm going to give you practical advice on how to secure your medical devices, because before I started this job, I had all these, great idea of security risk assessment, and but there are things like practical things that you could do that will, because it's so difficult to operationalize everything, but there are certain things you could do to limit the risk. And then I'm going to give some ideas. I think most of you might have a tool like Zingbox, Order. So how can you operationalize that tool? And then I'm going to talk about future strategies. So I've taken this from SHU, but really it outlines our security issues. So it's mainly, the biggest one is really, as you see, like user practice. So it's someone plugging a USB into a medical device. So your medical device doesn't have antivirus, and then, gets antivirus. Someone browsing the internet from a medical device and then back in with malware. Outdated OS, we know that we're going to face a huge amount of, we still have Windows XP, but we're going to face a huge amount of Windows 7 devices that are going out of support in January, and then we're going to have to find a solution for that. Network segregation, meaning some of the devices, maybe the organization haven't been doing segmentation really well before, so you have devices sitting on the domain with PC, they're not segmented on the network. We also have default credentials, password, username, and password. Those are one of the big things you find. So we have a lot of wrong ideas about what medical device security is. And then, so we see a lot the infusion pumps. Hospira has made the news, and now we have BD making the news as well for Urgent 11. But we see also a lot about implantable devices. But let me tell you, I mean, implantable device, someone is wearing a pacemaker. I mean, I have nothing. Then someone will have to bring a big device and try to exploit that vulnerability. There are easier ways to kill people than to really try to hack into their pacemaker. So it's not what medical device security is about. I think it's more, I think the industry is trying to, no, I'm not saying that it's not about, it's not a real issue here. It's more about, I think, researchers trying to hack into their own devices, and then they make the news, then, that company makes the news. There is a lot of financial incentive in there as well. We hear about CT MRI, that's legit. But I don't think like imaging devices are the most vulnerable one. I think it's because of the impact dollar amount to them. and then also industrial control system. But really, if you think about it, the risk is more to outdated operating system, legacy devices, right? So what's a legacy device? So the definition of a legacy device is a device with an outdated operating system. However, we know well with a medical device, even if it's a supported OS, the moment it leaves the manufacturer, it's a legacy device. Why? Do we know why? Yeah, it's not going to get patched. It's oftentimes it's there, it's sitting, it's even if the security updates are there, they're not going to get applied. So that's legacy. And then also misconfigured devices, devices that are internet accessible, meaning that they can be reached from the outside. This is often not good. It's a misconfiguration. So the main thing to come up with is that medical device security is not what we think it is. It's these real issues, the fact that medical devices are not updated with security update, the fact when there is a critical vulnerability, it takes a year to get an update, the fact that you have to look into the security advisory 10 times over the next 3 months to figure out if the security update is released, that there is no communication, coordination with the recalls and alerts. You receive a paper, you receive all the serial numbers of your devices that are impacted, and you see what to do. And if you don't do anything, they will call you. It's not the same with security. So why has MedStar taken the approach to build a health technology security program? So we figure out that we have a need. I mean, our CISO, medical device security is so related to the workflow, to the clinical workflow, and the IS security team does not really have a knowledge of that. So the vision was to have a team that will work with clinical engineering, with lab and pharmacy, that has a working knowledge of medical devices and the SANS clinical workflow, has experience working with clinicians and a variety of stakeholders. So it's not a person often that's sitting behind the desk that just doing security. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? We try to work closely. We try to be on site, talk to clinicians, talk to physicians. I've talked to physician and explained to him why he needs to be using two-factor authentication, which your bank should do, send you a text. So you enter that number, which adds, as a layer of protection, because he wanted to just be in his car, enter the IP address of the camera and see the camera. And I explained the risk. And because we understand the workflow, we say, you don't want to be, we don't want to take that risk. So I think we gave him a tablet with MDM on it, and now he's using two-factor authentication. But some of the other things we've done to build the program is also the first to engage the stakeholders. We have an internal audit doing our medical device security program. Steve Bloomberg, Gio have participated in it. And then it's with findings, and then that has visibility with senior leadership. These are the findings. And then each department will own their findings, because what we found out is that not that people don't want to do the work, they don't know that they have to do it. And it's easy with, clinical engineering, we own the inventory, but when you talk about pharmacy, when you talk about lab, these are not technical people. And if they manage their devices independently, they don't really know what to do. But then if you have ownership, you as the business owner, you need to do these certain things. And then we had findings and meetings, and then the mitigation were presented to senior leadership. So build the culture of security, healthcare team understand what it means. I think security traditionally does not do a good job of explaining the simple words, the risk. Even myself, sometimes I find myself using attack vector, exploit, and I'm like, those clinicians don't. I myself 2 years ago didn't know what exploit really means. I mean, so it's really using those terms, simplifying the thing, and explaining why it's important for them to use certain to stop certain behavior, to have MDM on their phones. I think once you explain the impact in simple terms, they don't want to be responsible for any of that. So they will be willing to be compliant. And then executive support is important because oftentimes security comes as it's an additional work, so it's not something that is it's going to generate revenue. You cannot measure it. So all you can measure is you don't have loss. But you know, and then we transform our processes. So we work with all the people, all the stakeholders, to make sure that the proper information is documented and that security updates are applied. And in medical device, oftentimes it's mitigation, compensate to control. It's not always a fix. So how do I measure the success of the program? So my team does also the security addendum. So we review contracts, we work supply chain to add the security language to contracts. So we negotiated several security addendum with major vendors, and we're doing it as we purchase new equipment, but we try to do it with the entire all the products. Like if you have GE healthcare, you don't want to do just for patient monitor, you don't want to do just for imaging. So we negotiated for everything. And one of the things that is left now is the devices that are on time and materials. So how do we approach that? So we are working into a security language that will cover us for those, but for even devices that are not on contract. And my team does a security review. I have Wayne, I have Badr here. So we review all the medical devices and clinical technology that comes in place. We issue a requirement, and then those needs to be implemented by clinical engineering, by IS, and then critical and high findings, ICS cert. Those are security. I'm sure if you're part of the medical device information sharing group, which I'm going to talk about, there is this ICS cert. So these are the disclosed vulnerabilities. Zinc box alert that we've been addressing. Scanning result, we do perform scanning for medical devices, and also number of security incidents investigated. And security incident event, it doesn't mean it's an incident. It could be we weren't able to configure a DAP integration on a device. We need to transition a device to be on a clinical VLAN because it doesn't have AV on. So that's what we try to measure all the work and show that we're making a difference for MedStar. So what are the roles? I think I talked about that, but just putting out there as a reference. It's most importantly, it's really evaluating. We're constantly monitoring the threats. We're evaluating the impact on our environment. We give our stakeholders action items to do, compensate control. And then clinical engineering, you are the boots on the ground. So we apply security updates, capture accurate inventory. But it's really important in this entire thing that we work closely together. I think I've never seen such collaboration as in medical device security. I've met so many interesting people just working on medical device security. There is collaboration out there with FDA, medical device manufacturers, other health system. I think we're all trying to solve a real problem, and it makes it complicated because medical device security incidents are not really reported. If it happens, they're not reported because we just have researchers hacking their devices, and they're not reported because there is a reputation, there is other things in play. So it's important to collaborate, and if your organization is part of an information sharing organization, then you can have lots of information coming your way. We also do tabletop exercises, which you should attend Priya and Sam class tomorrow. And then we've done it with our emergency preparedness. We've done it with clinical engineering and our operation IT operation to simulate an incident. It's really eye-opener for everybody to understand what each other does. And then prepare in case of an incident. And the more you do these tabletop and you participate in them, the more you're prepared in case of an incident. And then I'm gonna go over, like now I'm gonna go into the practicality of what it means to apply security into the life cycle of the medical device. So first is the procurement process. You might not have your security people reviewing, but you could be reviewing those devices. You look at the MDS2, you look if the device have a antivirus, encryption, what's the patch management, who will manage the OS, is that IS, is that clinical engineering, is that the medical device manufacturer? It's important to have those roles and responsibility clear. And then security contracts, not everybody is doing that, so I won't put that in there. So for the inventory, you know, at MedStar, we're doing a good job in documenting this, the IP, MAC address, host name, whether it's wireless or LAN, the operating system, the software version. It's the basics. If you don't know this, you will not be able to, you will be struggling with managing applying patches or security vulnerabilities. So our clinical engineering team are doing a good job with that. And also you want to be able to know how to patch it. You need to be able to have the, is it something that you will have to look into to the GE or to the security website and see if the patch has been released. And then for us, it's the security requirements that have been released during the security review. So, so if you're struggling with collecting this information, I mean, there are certain companies that will help you collect that inventory, but I think it's a good exercise to go into it, divide it, because you want to be able to capture that information and keeping it up to date. And then we go into vulnerability management. So this is everything everybody could do. ICS cert, if you go into the US cert website, you could register for them, but you will receive everything. Who's part of the HSAC here, like the hospital? Okay, not a lot, so that doesn't help. Because we get a lot of information through that. So we get all the security notifications through that. But there is a group called Medical Device Information Sharing. So you might be part of HSAC. You just want to check. This is so that you could join this group. There is a lot of good information shared there. But there is also now recently GSF, Department of Homeland Security, and FDA has started this coordinated disclosure process. And then we've had, this is how the urgent 11 vulnerability were disclosed. This is how also the first FDA recall for an implantable device. But lots of information, and this public information. And then you want to be able to have all your medical device manufacturers security website to be able to look for those updates. And you want to be able to apply patches. So regular security updates, and especially those critical ones like Microsoft vulnerability, and what it means by vulnerable. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I'm going to explain what it means. So it means that the malware can spread from one computer to the other without any user interaction. So this is, you know, this is the most, like, when we see this, we're like, emergency, red flag. And then, because often, most of the time, security, you don't have the fix, so we often ask our people to do compensate control, disable RDP, enable network level authentication. We want to make sure to keep a documentation of what devices we patch, what device we incorporate compensated control. So exception request is a form that your IS team has for anything that doesn't meet the standard. If you keep that, you send it to your IS people, you keep it with your asset, you know that that device you will have to monitor and ask your medical device manufacturer people when they release a patch for it. So the other thing also that we security raise a flag is anything that has to do with remote code execution. So anything that can be exploited remotely, that someone doesn't have to be in your environment. That's where also we're like emergency red flag. So really, I mean, there is a lot of, we do a lot of risk. You have a risk evaluation of all these vulnerabilities. Some of them might have a CVS score of 8, but if you look at the vulnerability, someone has to be in your environment, someone has to know your network credentials, someone has to have all of that. So, you know, it's always good to patch it, but if you have to prioritize your work, you want to make sure that you prioritize these critical ones. And the way it's going, it's getting a little bit, I don't know what we will be facing in a couple of years, to be honest, but it's coming our way. So it's a good idea to have, you know, within your, to expand your department. I know it's not always possible, but if you have an audit and you show all the amount of work, having someone within your team who understands IS, who understands security is really, really helpful. So there is also, if you have a passive network monitoring tool, you don't want to be sitting there with all those alerts. You want to work with your IST people to mitigate those. You want to restrict internet access on your medical devices. You don't want them to be able to go everywhere. You want to also change default credentials. Default credentials, especially those network-facing accounts that, you know, they know the user passwords and that's it. They are in your environment. And then you want to be able to address your out-of-support devices. So replace is number 1. Submit an exception request if you cannot replace it to be able to keep it on the network. And then make sure work your IS people to make sure they're properly isolated on your network. It's not enough to put them on a VLAN. I mean, I know we talk about microsegmentation, but in practice, nobody is doing microsegmentation because it's so complicated. But you could buy firewalls for these out of support. And the complication with that is also they cannot be managed remotely. So it's really a problem for HGO, these out of support devices. And what doesn't help is that it takes 3 years or whatever for the medical device manufacturer to be able to release the device. So by the time it's released, it's already, you know, obsolete in certain extent, or it's Windows 7 and they're selling it to you now. At MedStar, we stopped all of that. And then this is more for more mature programs. During preventive maintenance, you can check for these things: default passwords, AV, encryption, patching, and document that. And then we do a lot of scanning as well. So we do discovery scan during the procurement process before we put the device on the network. We do vulnerability scans. We do also scans for anything that is abnormal behavior. We scan also to confirm vulnerabilities. So any question regarding what I just said? So I'm hoping that the industry is going to be able to catch up. So I think there was one thing. So we have about 28 medical device manufacturers that have connected medical devices, but yet we only have a few ICS cert related to those vulnerabilities. So does that mean our medical devices do not have vulnerabilities? Yes, we know that, right? It's just because, you know, there's not enough effort involved in it. And then one of the other things too, if you say these things, like you become an expert in medical device security. So what we care about, the entire security industry is driven by privacy, confidentiality. So confidentiality is number 1. So we want to care about your PHI, and then integrity of the data, that the data is not compromised, and availability. We want to be sure that the data is available. But in medical device security, this whole formula is changed. So it's often the first number 1 we care about is the integrity of the device, because we want to be able that the device function the way it's supposed to, so it doesn't cause harm to the patient. So it's and then we want the device being available, and obviously confidentiality for the PHI element is important as well. So for your, how many of you have like a tool like Zingbox or the Cloud Post? Okay, 1, 2. Okay, well, you're ahead of the game. This I'm gonna give you some tips so you're prepared for that. It's coming. Everybody, most people are going with these tools. So what I'm gonna talk about, I think, what I have is selection criteria for these tools. There are so many out there. Like it used to be just Zingbox, and now it's Zingbox, Assimile, and all these vendors, and they all do almost the same things. So we have selection criteria, deployment, alert mitigation, can you leverage the tools, and lessons learned. So how established is the company? So I think there are lots are popping up, but I think it's important to have a company that is really established, because if you're going to work on those integration and your EA is telling you you want right access to this, and you're like, it's a big company, they already been deployed in this big health system and it's working well, we didn't have any issues. The system that it can integrate with, I put the most important ones, the network access control, if you're there. Cisco Prime, all your network switches information helps you locate the location of the device, where the device is, so you can easily locate which device, where is the device that's impacted by malware. Cisco Wireless LAN, it gives you all your wireless information. That's always helpful. SIM SOC, in our case, the critical alerts are going to our SOC. And then the vulnerability scanners that they have available, because these tools will show you that some devices are vulnerable to certain vulnerabilities, but it's potentially impacted. So I don't want you wasting your time and mitigating things that are not confirmed vulnerabilities. So you want to be able to do either yourself, you do vulnerability scan, or have your IS people do vulnerability scan to confirm these vulnerabilities. And then some of them come with a vulnerability scan included. So customize the solution to your need. I think it's important to have everybody in place in the beginning. You have IS security, enterprise architecture, lab, pharmacy, clinical engineering involved. If you're sponsoring that, some of the clinical engineering were the one sponsoring this tool. In our case, it's information security. So you want to, when you buy these licenses, you want to be able to see what is it that I want to be monitoring. Because you could monitor your medical devices, medical IoT, you can expand it to other IoT, and you want to be able to validate that you're capturing all the traffic you need. I think if I can highlight this one in red, I will, but it's making sure that you're capturing all the traffic, because this tool can only be good if it's seeing everything. If it's not seeing everything, then it's not going to alert you on those devices. And then these are the network element that you need, Cisco Prime for the switches. I don't know if you have other not Cisco house, you will have equivalent for this. And then you want to make sure that you incorporate yourself in your IS security incident response, because they want to be able to help you with certain investigations that you don't have the tools to do those investigations. And two, they have the expertise to do those type of investigation. And then establish a scope of work and workflow. So if it's a tool that is purchased by clinical engineering, so will you like opening work order for it? That's a good practice to keep track of that information. And when you close the alert, you want to be referencing that work order so that it's all documented. Alert, vulnerability, and mitigations. These tools will give you like certain level of severity. Do you want to be handling advisory alert? Do you want to be handling warning alert? I do critical and high severity alert definitely needs to be addressed. Like I said, see if you have a security operations center. They monitor all what's going on with the network. So if you try to scan a list of the devices, someone might call you from your IS, like, what are you doing? So you want to make sure you work with them from the beginning. And then perform vulnerability scanning. These tools, you could use them for to know what's your risk landscape, because they do risk categorization. So you show you which devices are your high risk, or do you have any critical devices? What are your high risks? So it really helps with prioritizing patching, mitigation, and it shows you also how your VLAN are set up. And this is data from ZincBox that shows that most health systems out there are mixing medical devices with traditional devices on the same VLAN, which is not a good practice. I'm not showing the graph, but I'm seeing it on the side. But you see the graph, I think. So most of them, 72% are mixing medical devices and non-medical devices on the same VLAN. And then you want to be able to plan for any integration upfront costs, all of that adds up. And then depending on your network infrastructure, it might all go through the core, it might not. You might want to budget for tab devices if your network is congested. They take the load of the network. You want to be able to budget with help operationalizing this tool. It's a major endeavor to a certain extent, depending what devices you're monitoring, depending the size, the complexity of your organization. So all of the things that you will need to take into account prior to deploying these tools. And the third thing, you have that here. And then our next strategy is really for us is integrating the ZincBox with our SIM, and then replacing the current CMMS system with a more modern one. And then it's really developing a program for IT and industrial control system. We're doing that, but by I mean developing the program is having more FTEs for that. Developing a business plan. So I'm just gonna stop the recording so we can share freely information. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover here. Anybody would like to share some of the lessons learned when they were mitigating WannaCry, or patching for WannaCry, or mitigating the recent RDP vulnerability, remote desktop protocol? Anyone want to share like some of the issues you've experienced, kind of operationalizing medical device security? Yeah.
You said scan devices prior to use. How are you scanning them devices prior to use?
So we have vulnerability scanners. The tool we use is Rapid7. So we do target as we ask the customer.
Rapid7 and not like ZincBox.
We've used that as well, but Rapid7 will give you a little bit more information.
So we recently hired a network engineer from the medical device manufacturer. He's still working a lot of our network security. He's helping us get better working on it. He works at
Okay.
Are there any trainings we can send him for certifications that would focus on medical device security so we can sort of bring them up to speed on that side?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I don't think there is, I'm actually asking myself the same question, but I think there is no certification. I mean, he's a network engineer, so I would recommend like the privacy certification, like HCI, SPP, or CISSP. But again, they're like not practical certification, but it's good for him to cover that. But it's more going to industry events like HISAC, being part of, if you're HISAC member organization, Bay State Health, so it should be, because it's a large system. So being part of the medical device information sharing group, there is a monthly call. Going to those, HISAC have 2 conferences, one in the fall and one in the spring. There's several medical device security conferences where you will get more, even local events. There have been with the FDA for the pre-market guidance, which is SBOM and CBOM, that I'm sure you heard about as well. But there is no like certification for medical device security. Maybe that's something that will come, but it's more also spending time with your technicians, getting familiar with the workflow. There is a lot of information out there you could read as well. But yeah, there's no.
Finally, well, here in this area, they have now even a social degree in cybersecurity. not for medical equipment, but I think when it comes to cybersecurity.
Oh, sure, I understand.
So they do have these programs now in schools, in the college, the social media, cybersecurity is available.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on how your information systems IT department coordinates with the environment shop, specifically when you're pushing patents, particularly like HPSS 7 or you push the updated patents? How does that coordination happen? How do those teams collaborate and make sure that the IT department information comes to the client?
So we look in it, so those, yeah, we have some medical devices that are actually on the regular patching cycle that through our Microsoft CCM. It's more like about, we communicate when the patch, so we know when the monthly patch goes every year. But we also we do a separate setting for medical devices. We don't want it to reboot in 8 hours. So we put them often in the 7-day delay reboot. So in the end, like you have a kind of a pop-up that forces you to go and choose the patches to apply to go into SCCM Software Center. No, no, we don't. We just talk about it, but there is no process where we send an email that we're pushing this patch. We do, so we have certain cards that, that are put on a QA testing, and it's not always something that's managed by clinical engineering, so we have IS people at the sites.
Right, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
bring up that gap.
yeah, there is definitely a gap there. The reason, so we have what is called like IS, application analysts. They often they know the equipment, so so because these devices like EEG, that there is an application part and there is a device part. So it's always, there is some gaps into like what IS and what clinical engineering covers, but the patching has fall in IS for those instances, and they know when the patch comes, and then they dedicate a card for QA testing, and then they're part of the test of if the patch causes issue, it's reverted back. I had people asking me if they want to put the Philips hemodynamic system into the regular patch. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that, because you don't want to be having the cath lab rebooting in the middle of the case. So I told them that's just, that's just too much risk, I think, because they were like, why do I have to go and patch it myself? Can we automate it? And I think in certain cases, it's not always a good idea to automate these things, because if a cath lab is down, the revenue that you're gonna lose is tremendous. So it's unfortunately, with medical device security, you cannot automate everything. I mean, there are very limited devices that you could automate. Yes.
So,